Keeping the real Reformation alive, one topic at a time. Doth Protestants, doth Protestants, doth
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Doth Protest, a podcast on Reformation history and theology. I hope all of you are well. It's been a little while since our last episode. I've done some traveling. Um, James has been done some substacking,
Mm-hmm.
uh, as well as a lot of other things going on in both of our worlds. And so we it's been a little bit, but we're doing an episode today on just more of a catching up episode with a few particular things I wanted to touch on. Our next episode after this will be our part three. We've had people inquire about that we've had I don't know, a few people you mentioned, or one person you mentioned, James, especially appreciated our English Reformation series, which we've done two episodes on so far. That's our last two episodes. It's definitely going to be probably four, maybe even 5 part series. And so our next thing up after this will be an episode 3, and that'll be coming soon. So English Reformation, we didn't forget about you. We are continuing. We haven't even, we're just getting to the good stuff, I think, in
Yeah.
realm. So I think I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the last like couple minutes of see where we left off to remember where we're starting. So
Well, we're already past the White Horse Inn, so I'm spent.
oh, geese spent. Yeah, that's your favorite. It all goes downhill after that, right, for you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, we're here to, and well, how are you doing, James?
Life has been very, very busy recently, but good. I loved that last Sunday we had a children's sermon and we had 10 kids come up for that,
Hmm.
which was awesome. And I
You
even
do those
handed
like before the regular sermon or something, or?
no, the way that we do them is actually we do the children's sermon in place of the regular sermon.
Oh, okay.
So it I when I first started it, I when I first started doing it, following my rector's lead on that, I actually kind of thought, I feel like people are getting short shrift. But then I started actually hearing from parents and from others in the pews saying, actually, your children's sermon probably spoke to me a bit better than your adult sermons normally would.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's just a way of also streamlining things so that
yeah. Well, and I know some might have this kind of quick reaction, say, well, children's sermon, it's just watering it down or dumbing it down or something like that. And I don't know. I think that the times where I've been some of the most moving moments where I've really just felt just were very moving. Like, the presence of the Holy Spirit and all was like um not hearing children's sermons per se, but me doing like children's messages. And
yeah.
like back when I in the first church I served where I did, which we had a school, and I would once a week do their preschool chapel. I'd sing a little couple of songs. I'd learn these like simple Bible songs. I'd whatever the story was. I'd see if there was like a uh fun kids song to it on YouTube that I
Hmm.
could teach them like 2 or 3 hand motions to do with it. And then I would tell the story, and you got to be, their attention span and everything. You got to be, you got to meet them on their level with that. And I realized I learned over doing that the gospel truth is so simple. I
Hmm.
mean, childlike faith. I mean, that's a thing, and we
Hmm.
have to have faith like a child. So it's yes, I could see how a lot of adults coming in from their weeks, whatever they went through that week, it might have just, sometimes just something so simple, because the gospel can be preached so simply.
Yeah.
Could have very well been that comfort they needed. So I get it, but
Yeah. So that's the good stuff. I'm sure that the much of the content moving forward for the episode will talk about the other stuff.
The other side, well, yeah, yeah, I was gonna. So for our listeners today, we were just kind of catching up. We do want to talk about James' Substack, which I feel absolutely terrible confessing I didn't go and read yet, James. I'm a jerk. But you know what? You haven't read some of the books that we brought the authors.
I'm actually notoriously bad about that. So, and I also feel like scrupulosity about, like I need to tell them that I haven't read the book so that I don't sound like an idiot. If I do sound like an idiot, it's because I haven't read the book. So, yeah.
I don't think you've even in the many times. Yeah, that sounded bad. I was gonna say even in the many times where you didn't read the book. No, I'd say it's more. It's not a majority of that. I don't know. Whenever you haven't read the book, first off, I wouldn't have known because unless you admitted it, they wouldn't have known. And then even when you didn't and admitted you didn't, so we all knew that you didn't, you still honed in on the subject matter pretty you. I'm not gonna say you didn't need to read it at that point, but it's like, I mean, there are some things you can just that you don't need to read. You can just get the cliff notes, but it's like
For sure.
the questions you asked, the way you contributed to the episode, it made it good regardless of if you read it or not. So I will say that. Not to
Appreciate it.
stroke your ego or make you feel or to excuse you not reading the books for
Right.
this show.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I literally don't care if you read the books or not for the show, But I do honestly feel bad because I that was on my agenda before. I also had kind of the parish life's been good, but it's been pretty busy lately. Um, but yeah, but so maybe it'll be cool. I can hear about it for the first time about your Substack. And why don't we start with that actually? What's the name of your Substack, James? And tell us I mean, I think a lot of our listeners will know what Substack is. I like Substack because it seemed to be, um, kind of a lot of platforms starting to get you know, people were only they were getting very selective about who they'd want on, and you just didn't have the type of creative control.
Right.
Substack was kind of a safe haven for a lot of people. Um,
Yeah.
artists, political commentators on not just it's not just in the left and the right. It's not just conservatives taking refuge there, but people who actually want to talk about things and be free to talk about them or
Yeah.
whatever, religious voices. I feel like Substack's been good for that in many
Yeah.
ways. And so I don't know. So I'm curious kind of what your experience with Substack is, but then yeah, specifically what you're doing on Substack.
Yeah. So Substack is just basically kind of like a social media for essayists. Um, so like you can follow or subscribe to a particular person. You know, some of the folks that we've had on the podcast have their own Substack. Mike Bird has one. Ben Crosby has one.
Yeah.
And it's basically, semi-regular to, weekly to some folks do daily writing, any number of things. It could be an essay, it could be a devotion, it could be just a quick note. It really, you do have creative license to do whatever you want, pretty much. And I like it. The one thing that I complain about, just to Rachel, is that when you are on Substack and you're looking at a feed, kind of like you have Facebook, instead of looking exclusively at the stuff that the people you subscribe to are writing, you are getting a whole bunch of recommendations based on your subscriptions and search history in Substack. I see you just
No, I was gonna tell you, but
subscribed.
it probably just notified you. I
It
just
did, yeah.
subscribed everyone to his Substack while he was talking. That's how bad of
Thank
a
you.
friend I
Yeah.
am. That's how bad of a friend I am.
No, you're you're number 26. So
Oh, I thought you'd be at like
I
926.
know, yeah. Well, it is a little niche, but anyway, so what Substack uh does is it tries to get you to subscribe to as many people as possible. And what's great and also a little bit frustrating is that there's a feature on Substack, kind of like on YouTube, where you can free subscribe or pay subscribe. And if you're on the receiving end, it's great. But what people do is they have free subscriptions and then they do extra content for money. And
Yeah.
so
I like the podcast world.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's like the podcast world, yeah. And I don't begrudge them at all. I mean, I've opened it up for pledges if anybody wants to, and I had one person pledge.
Cool.
Um, but
Yeah.
I'm planning on doing it just for free for right now, and then if it picks up and get some traction, then maybe I'll do some extra stuff with it. But it's just been fun. It's been interesting. So that takes me to what the actual Substack page that I'm doing is called, and I
Can I
decided to
just
call it.
read? Can I read your about page? Well, it's
Yeah,
not. Well,
that's
I
fine.
can read it. Is that all right? All right. It's
Do
not
it.
long. Uh, excuse me. Rogues and Reformers is the name of your. So, sorry, back up. The name of James' Substack is Rogues and Reformers. Rogues and Reformers explores the unexpected crossroads where comics meet faith. Sure, there are other places talking about comics and religion, but we bring a distinct edge. A theological lens sharpened by the Protestant tradition, especially the confessions of the magisterial reformers like Luther, Cranmer, and Calvin. This isn't a Substack just for theology nerds, though you're welcome here. We write for the whole spectrum, from the casually curious to the deeply trained theologian. Every issue, arc, and character is fair game for theological investigation. The good theology worth celebrating, the bad theology worth challenging, and the surprising moments where comics echo deep gospel truth. Our guiding framework is the historic distinction between law and gospel, the law that exposes our need, and the gospel that proclaims Christ's finished work for us. Think of it as an epic crossover event between your pull list and your confessional heritage. Grab your cape or your catechism and join us on the adventure. Cool. Is that basically what you were going to say?
No, I can be more eloquent in writing than in speaking. But yeah, so okay, so before I talk about the actual content of it, I'll just say this. So the reason why I decided to start a Substack is for one, I've always enjoyed reading and writing. And so the ability to have that creative outlet of writing has been something I've kind of craved for a while, and I would feed that on occasion by writing something for like Mockingbird.
Mhm.
But I haven't done it regularly, maybe ever,
Yeah.
because I was forced to write during school, and that also made it a little harder to do. Um, but what I started realizing was like I love comics. I've always loved comics, but I took a long hiatus from childhood up until about 8 years ago, where I didn't read a whole lot um, because I had other interests. But then my love and interest for comics was reinvigorated back in like 2018, so about 7 years ago. And I just been voraciously reading since then. And it's been one of those outlets for me when things get really like really like busy at church. And I have a free moment at home. I'll sit down and read Batman, read about Batman kicking someone's butt. Um, but I also will listen to podcasts about comics, and I usually try and gear it more towards like comics and faith intersection. And there's a crowded field when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Comics and faith, the intersection. Yeah.
Yeah, but what I've noticed is that for most podcasts or Substacks or sort of anything where comics and faith are being written or spoken about, it tends to err more on the side of talking about comics
Hmm.
rather than theology. And usually people go so broad um, with their audience that they end up sort of practically, if not implicitly, intentionally, erring more like towards like a Unitarian framework, so that there's no one that can take offense. It's
Hmm.
and that often will bear out in moralism. So I decided that I wanted to do something like what we're doing with Doth Protest, but sort of Doth Protest meets comics
Yeah.
and theological analysis.
But it's not, but I see it would be cool to have like a graphic novel of like Martin Luther's
Oh,
Martin.
there's
Just like,
that
well,
stuff out there.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah, yeah.
There's at least probably a stop motion animation one of the Playmobil Luther, but uh no, I digress. But when I think of, and Kyle Tomlin, who's a friend of our show, he's been on the podcast a few times. He was part of a podcast that
Hmm.
looked at, it's called God and Comics, looked at the intersection of comic books, and I remember we had him on to talk. He talked about it. One of the times he was on, he talked about that.
Hmm.
And I remember a big thing that I think came up, or maybe it was a point that they were stressing, and maybe you're stressing too, is that comic books kind of give, um, obviously, like we're raised, we reading these, we look up to these superheroes and we marvel at them, no pun.
Yeah.
But like the truth is that um no human is in reality, nobody's invincible, and
Hmm.
we're all flawed, and
Yeah.
we all do things that are not admirable and things that are not good or just, right?
Right.
And so how, is comic books, I could see how that could be a fun escape for us, but like I don't know, what's the mess, do you see think Batman, Superman, um the Fantastic Four? I don't know. I'm not a big, I'm not a big comic book guy. Though I
Sure.
love the Batman movies, especially Michael Keaton ones growing up, but like um and I used to love animated X-Men
Oh, yeah.
from the 90s. Loved that show.
Hmm.
But outside of that, I mean, I wasn't too big into especially how expansive those universes have gotten.
Right. Right.
But like what was I even going to ask? Basically, what are you like? Do you see these superheroes as figures to look up to? Um, I mean, how would you answer that?
So okay, so yes and no. Um, part of the sort of impetus for doing this is I guess it's been maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I read an article in Crossway from Dane Ortland about ways to not read the Bible.
Hmm.
And one of the ways that he says to not read the Bible is to read it as if everybody's a superhero,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That um, these are all examples to emulate. Because like all you have to do is scratch beneath the surface and realize that only Jesus is perfect.
Mm.
Like David is called a man after God's own heart, which is about as good as it gets, and yet he
Yeah.
committed adultery with Bathsheba and had Uriah murdered.
Hmm.
Like, like that's a big deal. So every human being outside of Jesus is deeply flawed and has inherited sinful nature. But the problem is that, like, if you look at comics culture and if you look at our larger culture in general, what you see is people tend to get theological influence from things that are not inherently or overtly theological.
Mm.
So, like, you watch, like, you read Aesop's fables, right? Every story has a moral. The moral to all of those fables isn't always a Christian moral, right? So, like the example that I'll use, time and again from Batman in Batman Begins is Katie Holmes' character, Rachel, in that movie, who's the love interest of Bruce Wayne,
Hmm.
aka Batman. She says to him, "It's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you."
Mm.
That is blatant moralism.
Right.
And the problem is that, like, when I was in college, I loved my college roommate, great guy, but he told me, I want to get that tattooed on my arm, right? Because there's something epic about it. There's something like really enticing about it.
Hmm.
But it's because we all have a pretty high self-image.
Hmm.
Um, so, like, what I'm trying to do with this is yes, take superheroes down a peg or two, but also to build up the good examples that you'll see on occasion. So like um the first one that I wrote about a particular hero is on Spider-Man, and I talked about how for him, like he's constantly feeling guilt and weight and responsibility. I mean, for goodness sakes, one of the like the taglines for him is with great power there must also come great responsibility. And
Right.
so he feels what you would call in theologically Protestant terms the weight of the law,
Mhm.
but he never gets the gospel.
Yeah.
And like that's the problem is that he feels the weight of the law, but there's no release from that. So throughout the comics, he's always super whiny, super, and super like down all the time. He's one of the most depressing superheroes a lot of time, even though he can be funny.
Yeah.
So like I took that as a jumping off point to talk about the law and to talk about how the law can't be the final word for Christians. And so, like, I'm trying to use each of these superheroes as a way of addressing things like that. Lex Luthor, there was an issue of a series called All Star Superman called The Gospel According to Lex Luthor.
Mhm.
And so I wrote about how Lex Luthor is actually a moralist and talked about like all the ways in which that's shown and called it the anti-gospel according to Lex. Um, Mr. Freeze, I talked about idolatry. I mean, so like all of these are things that you can see openly in the way that these characters are formed. And a lot of them, are kind of archetypal examples of these things. And so
Right.
it really functions well to explain Protestant theology, but it can almost be a little too niche because for some folks, like not necessarily everyone is going to be highly nerdy about theology and comics.
Yeah.
So that would explain why I've got 26 subscribers. Um, Probably 20 of them are, um,
Well, I
let's
hope
say,
you have like two 200 after this episode.
I hope so. Hey,
Um,
it's fun. I hope you enjoy it. And I've got polls. Like I put polls in there. So,
cool.
the first poll that I did was who is your favorite Spider-Man in the movies? Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, or Tobey Maguire? Who would you
Uh,
say?
oh, for that, for it was Tobey Maguire, Tom Holland, and who?
Andrew Garfield. He was the amazing Spider-Man.
Oh yeah. I actually thought, well, the thing is, I'm not big on Spider-Man, but I actually think Tom Holland
Yeah, that's
fit
the right answer.
the comic Spider-Man, Peter Parker
hmm
the best. However, I think the Garfield movies were the most enjoyable.
I think the Holland movies are most enjoyable because I think that he gets the humor and the angst of Spider-Man. I think Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are a little more angsty
Yeah.
and not as funny.
Yeah.
Um, I enjoyed most of the movies. I didn't enjoy the Tobey Maguire movies mainly because a 30-year-old trying to play a 16-year-old is a
It
little
wasn't that
weird.
old, was he?
Oh, I think he was.
I don't think he was that old, but he was older, yeah. But
Yeah.
now that's always been a thing. Gosh, I look at some of these 80s teen comedies now. I'm like, that
Yeah.
person's like 26. Um, well, and when it comes to Spider-Man, I'm kind of indifferent. I do have stronger opinions about best Batman. Of course, I already said Keaton's
He
my
was 26 years old in 2002.
okay. Yeah, that's closer to 30 than 16. That's for sure. The so the and while I'm on the topic, before we shift to the next thing, to close off with your Substack, mind if I share an excerpt or read an excerpt from
Yeah, man, do it.
your Batman one?
Yeah.
Okay, Batman and the uses of the law. We have established that Batman understands his purpose to be the curbing of criminal activity in Gotham City. He achieves his goal through a potent mixture of theatricality, thus the costume, and fear, thus the bone breaking. In this sense, Batman intends to function as the first use of the law. But to understand that, we need to understand what the uses of the law are. The concept of the uses of the law comes from the Protestant Reformation, specifically from the writings of Martin Luther, in thinking through the ways that God works through his word and Holy Scripture. Luther began to parse out the ways in which God uses the law to accomplish his purposes. Luther came to the conclusion that God uses the law in two ways. One, to restrain and curb sin, and two, to reveal sin. In my article on Spider-Man, I established that what the law is. That which accuses us of sin reveals our inability to save ourselves and drives us to Christ. That is a summary of the second and primary use of the law as a mirror. Unlike the law's second and primary use, to reveal our sin and drive us to Christ, Batman leans into the first use, the law as a curb and restraint to stop violent outbursts of sin. This use of the law pertains to the civil realm and the governments that God has ordained to maintain order in society. That touches on my doctoral topic, by the way. Anyways, Batman is not simply an example of the law's first use, he is a distortion of it. He takes a role that God gave to governments and makes himself the sole authority. There's more there. There's more before that. That was really good. I enjoyed that. Man, I feel like I could definitely read more of these. I'm glad I'm subscribed to. For listeners, I'll put a link in the show notes to James' Substack, Rogues and Reformers. And even if you're like me, not really a comic book fan, I found enjoyment out of reading that. So yeah, thanks, man, for talking about it.
Yeah.
Looking forward to reading more. My topic,
Yeah.
we all got an assignment. James talked about a Substack. I mentioned listeners, I mentioned earlier in the episode I was traveling. I was actually gone. Well, it wasn't. It was about 10 days. I took one of those biblical trips. It was not the Holy Land. I would I I know you can go to the Holy Land right now, but it just with the world situation, I just wouldn't feel the safest doing that. But no,
Sure.
I went, my wife Rachel and I, yeah, listeners, both are we mention our wives time to time on the show. We each have a wife named Rachel.
Right.
And so, but wait, remind me your okay. My wife's name is spelled correctly, though. I'm kidding. She always says that to other Rachels. She's AEL at the end,
Yes, and mine is EL.
and she hates it when people miss EL. I don't know why. My stepmom's name is Rachel. My wife and my stepmom are both named Rachel Christensen, but one has an AEL, but and the other does not.
There you go.
So the footsteps of so we yeah, sorry, I got ahead of myself. I went on a Footsteps of Paul trip. It was through a travel company that does a hosts a whole lot of trips, and they do faith-based, biblically themed trips also for well, anyone can go, but church groups especially like going on those. This is the first time I took me, my wife Rachel, and 8 parishioners. There were 10 of us all together on a trip in the footsteps of Paul. We went to Greece and then spent a little time in Turkey as well. It was the first time I'd ever been to that area of the world, the Mediterranean. First kind of church trip I did like this. I did like a mission trip before, but this was like, kind of and it was in part spiritual pilgrimage. It was in part educational because to see the Bible come to life, to walk on some of the very places Paul um was amazing. And I was kind of, I was expecting it to be amazing. Really, it was really great overall. We went to Athens, and there's pictures on my own Facebook for those who may have had me as a friend on there, but also on my church that I serve, St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church in Lake Charles, Louisiana. We put some pictures on there as well. But we went to Athens where got to see the Acropolis, which was great. The thing about this trip is like this. I always wanted to go to Greece a little more than Jerusalem/Holy Land.
Hmm. Okay.
Because for one, obviously I'd love to see, well, Jesus wasn't just in Jerusalem; he was all over Galilee. I'd love to see that whole region Jesus went to, but like, I really love, of course, I love Paul's letters, Paul's theology, he's such an influence on the Reformation, obviously, but also just the Book of Acts is one of my favorite books. Just his journeys throughout that book are just so fun. I mean, you talk about comic book, you can make like I mean, you
Oh
can
yeah.
make a comic book out of it. And with Paul being the how did you say it when you're talking about everyone outside of Jesus is flawed? I mean, Paul's an example of someone that, like that.
Yeah.
So I find his story very relatable in ways and just a powerful testimony obviously to the gospel, but I always thought it'd be cool to go to these places. So I also liked I like Greco-Roman history too.
Oh yeah.
And I grew up kind of liking Greek mythology, not super into it, kind of like I liked some superheroes, but I wasn't super into it. Um, Though I used to play I had a CD-ROM, this was back in the 90s when I was a kid. I had a CD-ROM of Wishbone, Homer's The Odyssey, the Wishbone
Yeah.
edition.
Right.
How I
Right.
learned about the story of the Odyssey. I've always loved that story ever since. So we got to see, and I got to see all these places where, we got to see a lot of ruins. A lot of these ruins are to these temples and shrines to like these mythological gods and goddesses to this day.
Right.
And to see how that, it makes you appreciate, I think, because, you read Paul's letters, you read Acts, you're thinking, oh yeah, this is some good stuff, whatever. But when you go to these places and you see, oh, Paul was here saying that stuff. Oh, this is all to this day still. This is all a shrine to this god or this goddess, or this is a shrine to Caesar. I mean,
Hmm.
literally at the Acropolis, there is a um, recovered a little shrine to Caesar where he's referred to as the Son of God. It's actually right behind the Parthenon. Um, I knew that before going on the trip because we did a class at the church where we did 6 sessions where it was actually a video series called In Pursuit of Paul from Our Daily Bread Ministries, which was a guy walking around all these places just to get us kind of a somewhat of a visual oriented best you can. You don't know anything until you're there, obviously, um but overall it was fun. We went to Athens, we went to Corinth, uh went to my favorite place was Ephesus, which that's in modern day Turkey. So we did spend a day in Turkey, outside of Greece. Ephesus has so much. That was the biggest archaeological site.
Hmm.
And of course, the big theater, it's like an amphitheater is there that, Paul, that where the mob was that ran Paul out of town. And then there's this other cool stuff, but and of course, there's the facade of the Great Library of Celsus, which is an iconic picture, but of Ephesus, of an ancient Ephesus ruin. But there's this main road, what was like the main road of the town. It's pretty intact. In fact, that's a road you take while you're doing the tour for the most part. It starts with a C. I forget the name of it. But anyways, like while you're walking down that road, every time you look to your left or to your right, you see something that's been unearthed and it has some connection to some person or some event or like some deity.
Yeah.
It was just really there was so much of it at Ephesus that's why that was my favorite. It was just the coolest. It was my favorite of all the places we went to. But I mean, it was all good. We also and not all the places. There was a lot of overlap because this um, three of the days 10 days we were on water, so we were on a cruise for 3 of the 10 days. um and along the route we stopped in like Santorini and Mykonos. These are not places Paul went to. They're just, they're fun tourist places. I actually like Mykonos a lot, but um Santorini I just felt like it was just a bunch of shops selling junk. uh
Yeah.
so there's a lot of that everywhere. I mean, there's so many tourists in Greece, and they're well aware of it, and that's a lot of people like make a lot of people make their living from tourism. So and we also saw and we did this through there's different travel groups that run the same exact it's literally the same exact itinerary, but it's called the Footsteps of Paul and John. And that
Mhm.
actually might have been a more accurate name. I think it would be a more accurate name because we also went to Patmos for like a whole day. Or did we go to Patmos? Yeah, we went to Patmos for I think it was a couple days. Or we were doing John stuff for a couple days out of that. And and that was cool. I guess what I was obviously that It's very Eastern Orthodox over there. And I was
Yep.
reminded on how Protestant or how much of a reformational Christian I am with my understanding of the gospel, which I really just think is the Pauline understanding of the gospel.
Hmm.
Because I really, we saw a lot of Greek churches and even went inside a couple Greek, we got a tour of a Greek monastery, the hanging monasteries, which are in the Meteora monasteries, as it's called. They're built on mountains when the Greeks took refuge from the Ottomans. But yeah, there's just a lot of imagery of Jesus as judge.
Hmm.
There's the scales. There's always imagery of the scales, and there's so much
Hmm.
emphasis on judgment. There's no message of justification by faith alone. There's no that gets almost no emphasis. And like the way, and I don't know, some of the tour guides, the way they talked about their religion, it almost came off like I don't know if the English, and I want to give benefit of the doubt because like English may not be their first language, even though they spoke very good English. So there might be like they may, but the way like I remember like one of them said, "Oh yeah, this is where like we keep the bones. They keep the bones of some certain saint. We worship the bones." I'm like, wait a minute, we don't worship bones. And even I would think a proper Eastern Orthodox Christian would say we do not worship bones. Like
Right.
that's whole veneration slash worship distinction.
Right.
Um, but so maybe it was the kind of an innocent mistake. But I just felt like the way they saw their religious worldview was like you do good things and you do bad things, but you aim to do the good things. And if the good things outweigh the bad things, then right, well, that's the walk of faith, right? And that's how
Hmm.
our eternal reward is based on the the good outweighing the bad. And I thought, that's such, like, ugh, no, that's so unchristian.
Hmm. Right.
That's Islam. That's in the Quran. Go read that in the
Right.
Quran. And I don't, and I feel like that kind of crept in though, and I knew that. I mean, I've known that in theory that over church history, especially in the early parts of the church and in that very ascetical
Hmm.
um chapter of the church's history where I get where the monks were coming from when Christianity becomes the imperial religion and it's everywhere, it's like you lose the zest maybe and you want to feel that again and go to your cloisters or to wherever and live separate from society. I mean, I get where that urge may come from initially, but it just doesn't, for me, that's not the spirituality of the New Testament.
Right.
Jesus did retreat. There was always a time and place to withdraw, but he always came back into the world too. Um, and so it's yeah, I struggled a lot with that. And it's really prevalent. I mean, and I give them kudos, Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean, because they're so religious in comparison to Western. If the West's problem is secularism, I think the East's problem is like a cultural Christianity.
Yep.
And you go even more, you go to the Russia. I mean, I love Russian history. I mean, I'd love to go to Russia one day, but it's like the Russian church is just yeah, it's like a cultural institution in many ways, like an arm of the state. And so, yeah, I did struggle kind of with that, seeing, that a type of religiosity that I could not relate to at all.
Yeah.
I went on for a while.
So when I was really into Eastern Orthodoxy several years ago, um, I was reading a fair amount of the stuff by Callistos Ware,
Mhm.
Timothy Ware, who eventually became Callistos as a bishop. He wrote a book called The Orthodox Church, and one of the things that he says there is that monasticism is often viewed as a form of what's called white martyrdom. So it's a bloodless martyrdom because your life is completely given over to Christ and to the church. And so what ends up happening, this is my analysis. What ends up happening is when you give your life over to the church, it's treated as a kind of meritorious act, and it often is going to breed self-righteousness. I mean, pretty naturally so. But I think you're hitting on something that there is no justification by faith alone in Orthodoxy, and it's even more pronounced than in Roman Catholicism.
Yeah.
Orthodoxy actually proudly owns the title of semi-Pelagian.
Yeah. I would be a Roman Catholic over an Eastern Orthodox, but being forced.
Yeah, I mean that's Scylla and Charybdis, but yeah, I think you're probably right in the sense that while there is so much beauty and majesty in Eastern Orthodoxy, there is at least, I think, a stronger understanding of grace and how God works in grace in the Roman Catholic Church.
Hmm.
I know I have Eastern Orthodox friends who would absolutely vehemently disagree with me on that.
I don't know if we have Eastern Orthodox listeners. I don't, I mean, there's not many, of course, in our side of the world, and I don't even know if I have some acquaintances. Um, and I know a couple people who've had some history with it, but yeah, so of course we mean no offense at it. But I think part of this is we speak our conscience on this podcast. We need to.
Right.
And you know, and anyways, that so the Greece Turkey trip was great.
I'm
Um,
jealous, man. That's awesome. I would love to do that one day.
yeah, man, I really recommend it if you can. I'd do it again. Like there's places I've been where I like saw it, great. Don't need like England. I liked England a lot. I don't feel the urge to ever have to go back. No offense, England.
Sure.
I would go back to Greece. And I mean it was, it was a lot of trekking, a lot of this there was a lot of terrain, a lot of uphill, downhill walk. We did a lot of walking. It was, it took some energy. Um, and and we stayed at like four different hotels, and so I was ready to sleep in my own bed when we got home. I found myself like a week later processing and reflecting on the trip, and it was. But I think the coolest thing was just the group that went. We all, whenever you see with youth trips, you see with adult trips. You just when you go as a group, something you bond in a certain way that you can't in the regular routines of life.
Right.
And you think back on like years later, you think back on something funny that you all talked or something that happened on your trip.
Hmm.
It was really cool in that sense.
Yeah.
Last thing we're going to talk about is Charlie Kirk. I don't know. Oh, do we have to talk about this? No, it's been talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's been lots of good pastoral words put out on the matter. Uh, I do think I don't know. I was in our Bible study the other day and at the church, and a couple people went to a local vigil they did for Charlie Kirk, and um, they said how they really felt like that. Um, as tragic as it was, like so many people were brought together and there's a sense of unity. Like they were amazed at how many college students from our local community were at this. And I think it's all great stuff. I also think, unfortunately, and I know you were really struggling with this, that it brought out a lot of evil too. That what happened ended up bringing out a lot of evil out of people,
Yes.
um, which was really, really disturbing to see and hear, obviously, regardless of what your politics are. Um, yeah, but yeah, you want to speak more to that, James?
Yeah. So like, okay, part of what we do on this podcast is what I think Christians should do in general, which is to speak your conscience, but also to seek to be charitable and also to seek to not make a caricature of the other side. And I'm not perfect about
Which
that.
I may have done to Eastern Orthodoxy a little while ago.
Well, I mean, everybody's prone to it at one time or another, but there's a difference between ignorance and arrogance. And I think that what we've seen a lot with regard to Charlie Kirk's assassination has been arrogance, and self-righteousness. So the single biggest thing for me that's been troubling about all of this, I really, really, really don't like talking about politics on social media because it will almost exclusively alienate somebody. And I've got parishioners who are friends of mine, and
Mhm.
so they're never going to know how I vote because I don't talk about it.
Yeah.
But when something like this happens, the school shooting at the Roman Catholic school and
Oh,
the
in
sh
Minneapolis. Yeah.
Yeah, and the shooting of the lawmakers in Minnesota as well, who were Democrats, like that's objectively awful.
Mm.
And what we do is we teach a positive view of life, that God gave life as a gift. It's not something that can be taken away arbitrarily.
Mhm.
Um, but what has really troubled me with this is that there's been such an overt dehumanization of Charlie and of people who agree with Charlie about stuff that it has led people to the conclusion that it was objectively morally good that this young man assassinated Charlie. And that's what has troubled me in all of this. There's a celebration around this that's not just dehumanizing, it's
It's
evil.
demonic.
It is, it's
It's
evil.
satanic. Yeah.
Um, and what's also troubling is that it's brought out this unfortunate tendency that we have in our society to to base everything on sound bites and to rip stuff out of context and to
Mm.
intentionally modify quotations. And all of that stuff has been done about Charlie.
Yeah, yeah. And I agree. I never I knew who he was. I knew what Turning Point USA was. I do read a lot of political commentary, but and I'm going to sound snobby. It's a little more highbrow stuff than
Mm.
than like Turning Point or that I don't a lot of the kind of the mass audience popular political commentary is I don't really do a lot. I mean, I know who the people are. Like I know who Tucker Carlson is. I know
Right.
who Rachel Maddow is, but I just, I tune into them once in a great while. Like you in the ministry, I'm careful about politics. I'm careful about partisan politics. But I mean, I also think so many things are political, whether we want them to be or not. Not in the sense that they should be, recruited to be a weapon in the culture wars, but that,
Right.
how we live together as a people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
as a collective, you know, body living under, as you said in your Substack, the governments that God ordains to maintain, peace and order. I mean, it's a part of life, and
Mhm.
I appreciate politics in that sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think with Charlie Kirk, from what I could gather from what I've heard from him, from what I've saw from him, I see he was someone with strong conservative views who, for the most part, was charitable about it and liked to encourage open civic debate.
Right.
And that for me is very important because we need the freedom of like kind of like with Substack, what I mentioned at the very beginning of the episode. I think freedom of thought, freedom of expression is so important. Um,
Yeah.
Freedom of speech is so important. I don't respect someone who uses either of those as a license just to be a jerk, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that I then want to take that right away.
Yeah.
And and so I appreciate people like Kirk and people on the right, left, and in between who have that share that same principle, you
Yeah.
know. And yeah, so that's but yeah, I think you nailed it really just with it was a lot of people were disturbed by how a lot of people, probably the a small minority of people, but they're always
Yeah.
the loudest, how a small minority of people were celebrating this.
Well, I mean, I
And we
saw,
rightfully were disturbed by it.
yeah. Well,
So
and I saw different gradations of celebration. I mean, there are some people like the guy that worked for the Carolina Panthers. I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, and so I saw that this staffer for the Panthers got fired because he made some really vile comments about Charlie's
yeah.
murder. Being a comic book fan, there was a woman who was about to start a particular comic. I think it was a Batman comic, and she said some really vile things about
Mhm.
Charlie, like
Yeah.
good riddance, you know,
Yeah.
F word Nazi.
And
And
I
like,
think they have every right to say those things in the sense that we don't need to put them in jail for it, but come
right.
on. I mean, yeah, I don't, I didn't want, I want to
Well,
get so much into that,
it's
but your employer, there is accountability too, and
right.
you do represent your employer or
Right.
the
And
brand, the team. And so I don't think people are getting that distinction so much that
yeah.
we're not saying that it should be illegal for them to say that, but it's like in the context of, I mean, every job I've had, I could be fired for something I've said,
Yeah.
you know.
And so like
Because it's and I understand that, So,
so like the thing for me is that the thing that pushed me over the edge, like I knew that there would be people who would celebrate Charlie's death.
mhm,
Um, because all you have to do is type in Charlie Kirk online and you get a bunch of very uninformed opinions about him. And that's one of the failures of the internet is that everybody can just spew their
mhm,
vitriol without needing to have any sort of fact checking.
yeah,
And that's a both sides thing, right? That's not just, one side or the other. But what really concerned me is when I started seeing Episcopal clergy saying things like "you reap what you sow,"
yeah,
or the pastor of Alfred Street Baptist Church up in uh, the Alexandria, Virginia area, uh, saying "how you die doesn't justify how you lived," and like
it's almost like there's no dignity in human life, yeah, or
right.
no dignity and no understanding this. I think it was this common human decency that everyone like, even like that relative that nobody liked when they died, you you said you didn't say disrespectful things at the funeral. You honored them or something. You like it's not. It is scary to think that's just getting lost on some people.
Well, and like I don't want to give clergy more than what we're due, but clergy do have a lot of influence on people in the
Oh
pews.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
if people in the pews think that it's okay to speak with such an overt, heavy-handed self-righteousness,
Mhm.
then they're going to think it's okay for them to do that. And it's not on either side.
Yeah.
You can disagree with him, but 5 minutes after he's dead, saying, I'm sorry for his wife and children, but he's not someone to be emulated
Right.
is just in poor taste.
It's very poor taste.
Just just hit period after I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Don't
Like,
say but, just
yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
And so, I'm very concerned about this moment in our society because there is a severe radicalization of people in
Hmm.
general. And it's often because there's misinformation.
Hmm.
Jimmy Kimmel got taken off the air because he blamed um, Charlie Kirk's death and this kid who did it on the kid who, and he said he was, a MAGA guy, right?
Yeah,
Except for
which wasn't accurate from what I've
no, it's
read.
the exact
Yeah,
opposite.
exactly.
He
Okay.
was actually dating and living with a trans person, a man who was transitioning to a woman. So
Well, I
like no
guess
one
you could be MAGA still and do that. I don't know. I mean,
You could, but his
but I
his
think
his
what you're
politics
saying,
changed from his parents.
sure. I think
Uh,
what you're saying, Kimmel was scoring some political points for his,
right,
yeah, by saying that person's the other side or some, but
right.
it wasn't accurate. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what this should have been doing is what Charlie would have wanted, which is like fostering conversation
Yeah.
and rigorous debate, but doing it in a way like Charlie was not always the greatest in debates. He would be
Right.
dismissive. He could also be a little bit condescending, but you're going to be kind of hard pressed to be level headed when the person across the mic is just shouting at you and saying you're a fascist without even knowing what the term fascist means.
Yeah, you're gonna like kind of lose your bearing a little bit trying to your composure, I guess, when the other person has absolutely no composure. But I don't know. I mean, I watched debates. I watched like formal debates of I mean, over the many years I've just,
Yeah.
YouTube, you can find a debate between this person versus this, commentator versus that commentator over this issue or this figure over, I like it because it gets you. you get to see all sides when each voice gets to have a say and gets to have the time and space and like I love that. I love debates. But where are they going with? Oh, I would be hard pressed to find in any of the debates I've watched, even the most, well done, where people were very were kept their composure. They were professional. They were everything about, they all the proper decorum was observed. I'd still be hard pressed to find anything where like someone's eyes didn't roll at one point, or
Right.
someone like, was chuckled a little bit, or someone
Right.
got a little worked up and just got a little sarcastic. Like that's in every, that's going to be a part of debate.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, I don't know what if people are thinking, that Charlie was completely unreasonable about the way he went debating or something. I don't see where, from the little I've observed, again, I didn't watch a lot of them, but I don't know where those people would be coming from
So I'll show my hand a little bit and tell you that I've watched hundreds of videos that Charlie has done, like
Mhm.
different conversations. I've watched probably 50 hours of Charlie talking, and
Mhm.
I've yet to find one where Charlie could legitimately be called, a racist, homophobic, anything like that. He spoke
Nazi,
a
or yeah,
Nazi, a
there's all kinds of
fascist.
these names
They're
of
all they're all reductions, they're
yeah,
reductions of his position, and
yeah,
no one likes it when that's done to them. So why would we want to do that to
yeah.
him? But the last thing I'll say is that the celebration of the death is just it makes my stomach sick. It makes me
Hmm.
sick to my stomach. But the thing that really pissed me off and still pisses me off is that people are not just saying they're glad he's dead, they're also condemning him to hell.
Yeah.
Um, and
Which is
like,
not, that's not our prerogative. We do not, we can't
no.
know who's in hell, and even if we did, don't celebrate it. We should, grieve it, but and it shouldn't be done as a, we shouldn't ever wish someone to go to hell. That's, or
And he also
just that
confessed
vindictiveness is, yeah, just it is, it's stomach churning. Yeah.
when he also confessed Christ. I mean, 3 days
Right.
before he was, assassinated, he posted or he tweeted on X, Jesus defeated death so that you could live.
Hmm. Right.
Like Charlie absolutely believed the
Right.
gospel.
Yeah.
Charlie is with Jesus. I can say that definitively.
Hmm.
Um, so what it boils down to is sort of bringing things full circle back to one of the things that I was addressing in my Substack and that we've talked about so much here is moralism.
Hmm.
It's I don't like what you're saying, and therefore, because you said that, you have condemned yourself to the fires of hell because you disagree with me.
Hmm.
It's like moralism and also you becoming the arbiter of truth, aka God. It's like very, very disturbing.
Hmm. Right.
And so I finally ended up posting something on Facebook about it, which um, generally got a fairly good response. There were a couple of folks who had the occasional disagreement or something, but it was good. And I think that it was helpful because, you know, when you think about it, I was posting this on September 11th, which is the 24th anniversary of one of the worst moments in American history.
Yeah.
Charlie was assassinated the day before. And the whole message I was trying to convey was it's gross that people are celebrating this. And it's important to know that violence doesn't ever fix the world, except for the one act of violence, which was the violence of the cross,
Hmm.
wherein Christ died for Charlie and for you and
Right.
proved that he loves you both.
Right.
Like, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'll get off my stump
Yeah.
now.
Right. Yeah, no, and it's I hear you. I hear you out. But anyways, yeah, that's a tough subject. I know people are still and again, it's also it's I think that person I mentioned in Bible study, the other day who went to that vigil, it has brought people together, right?
Yeah.
And I think he can be a preach regardless of what someone's politics are. Um, the fellow, we fellow Christians can really, I think, be inspired by his faith, um, as well as even political opponents be inspired by just the spirit of having lively discussion and debate, because that's so
Right.
important in a democracy. So, yeah, the listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you haven't tuned us out by now, and we are looking forward to our next episode. It will be episode 3 of the English Reformation. Take care. God bless.